Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Well, welcome to 2025.
Woohoo, we made it.
Here. Didn't feel like 2024 lasted very long. Went real fast.
Or some people would say it was an entire lifetime in 1 year.
I was going to say now enter the season where we're writing the dates on our checks wrong for like 3 months, except no one writes checks anymore.
Oh my
so that's
gosh,
kind of a really
so
antiquated reference.
That is so funny. I used to routinely screw that up.
Yeah. Do you remember? I used to actually on my first the next 10 set of checks, I'd write 25 on it. Yeah, because I'd mess it up all the time.
That was smart. No, I never thought of that.
Well, don't ever think about it again because
Right.
you don't write any checks
I don't
anymore.
remember the last time I've written a check. Yeah.
Well, we have had a couple just sidebar conversations in our
Yes.
lives around the idea of letting go.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it seems kind of appropriate at the top of the year here to talk about things that maybe
Letting
we need to
things
let
go.
go. Or how do you let go of things that maybe you've been holding on to
Yeah.
all year long, and
Uh-huh.
maybe this is the year to
Yeah.
let some of those things go.
And I consider this a little different than the focus of regret, right? Because sometimes that goes hand in hand. Like you start to, you can hold on to something too long and it becomes a regret. This is like for me
A regret or like a resentment.
Yes, or a resentment. Yeah. I love this idea of letting go from a very positive nature, from a more proactive state. I've had 2 things happen in the last week that I have been so happy about because I realized I let them go. So I'm anxious to talk about that.
Do tell. Well, first just talk about what it feels like when you're holding on to something
Yeah,
that's
that's a
really
really
bugging
good
you.
idea.
I mean, that's it, right?
Yeah.
There's something that irks you for some reason and you
Mhm.
just can't get over it.
Yeah. And I think that feeling, I want to hear what you say too, but you know how I always say your body will tell you how you're feeling before your body or before your head does.
Mm-hmm.
And, sitting when you don't want to let something go, when you don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
or it's just gnawing at you, for me, it sits right in my solar plexus. And it just bugs me. It just bothers me. Like it's a constant little side note voice happening while I'm doing everything else. My quote, normal stuff, my normal thinking.
Yeah. It's funny how that stuff sticks around. I had this work, I had this work project. We had this internal project name at work, and the name, I didn't come up with it, but it bugged me for some reason, and I couldn't figure out why. For weeks and weeks, I was like, why does this? It wasn't like a brand name. It wasn't it wasn't anything. It's just an internal name of a project, and I was like, why is this bugging me? And I could not let it go. I was just I was asking people, doesn't this seem like a weird name? And people are like, why do you care?
Exactly. It's sitting in your
important
guts.
to name things right. Then I figured out what it was. It was actually the name. One of our competitors has a feature of the same name, but it was just kind of it's kind of in the back of my head, and I couldn't figure it out until for weeks. And then once I figured it out, I was like, oh, finally, that itch is gone.
So you know what that just tells me? That tells me that there is actually, maybe there are positive reasons why people don't let things go for a little while.
Maybe.
I never thought about that until you told that story, because in that situation, maybe it would be good to alter it just a little bit because of that, right?
Yeah.
But having to sit with something long enough until you sort it out.
It was so annoying.
I think when I think about letting go, I'm at the stage in this story where I should be letting it go, and I am not doing so.
Oh, hey, listeners, did everybody hear Melissa use the S word?
I should. Okay, I have two examples.
Okay,
go ahead.
Yeah, go with your example, but I had some follow-up questions.
Okay. So, I've been coaching for a long time, and I have a long-time client in which I've coached a lot of their executives. There was a particular executive on this team that I was really close with for quite some time. And she was someone I had a high affinity for, really liked her. We had a really good coaching interaction and relationship, and she was doing a lot of the work necessary in coaching. And that said, she was a bit scattered and had a hard time staying focused on a number of things, which is one of the things she was in coaching for. And there was a time where she was late, like a couple of times in a row for coaching sessions. And I have such a routine in my schedule, and I have to because I have such a stacked deck all the time. And I always ask people, I need at least 24 hours if you're going to have to cancel something. Obviously, emergencies come up, but in this situation, she canceled, but she did so via text 5 minutes before the session. And it was almost like she was almost like being kind of flippant about why she was canceling it. And it did not sit well with me. So I sent her a message back and said, well, let's get back on the calendar and then let's talk about this. And she didn't reply. So I was like, oh, well, and I never think about, with the people that I work with, their schedules are worse than mine oftentimes. And I don't think anything of it. But in this situation, it kept going. Like I probably reached out 8 to 10 times on text, email, and voicemail, just because I felt like this was something that was very important for her. And she and I had established such a good, strong partnership. We knew each other really well, and I'd done just a lot for her family and, just all sorts of stuff like that. But anyhow, I eventually just let it go. This is a few years ago now. And, but it always bothered me. Like out of all of the clients, I have no problem when there's communication and this is what we're doing, this is why. And I don't have a care in the world if somebody stays in coaching with me at all. If they're not wanting to be in there, they're ready. But it was the way in which it was done. So it bothered me. It just bugged me. Yeah.
So what is it about some things that stick with you? It's like, it's like someone did something that you felt wasn't proper. Or
showing
they treated
respect.
you. There was disrespect, or sometimes it's your sense of justice or rightness, right? That wasn't the correct way of dealing with the situation.
Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah, it just bugged me. So every time her name came up, now, by the way, no one would have known that it was bothering me that much. And when I was speaking with the rest of the executive staff, obviously I never mentioned a word. I did say something to the VP of HR after a year. Because I didn't want my client to lose any grace or to be thought of in a bad light. I didn't want that to extend into her workplace, although her same behaviors did the same thing in the workplace and did the same thing, right? Okay. But anyhow, the reason I'm telling the whole story is because recently I did a team event for their group. And, people took quite a bit of time off during COVID for team events. And here now we're having a team event. And she was in the room. And I thought to myself as I was doing the pre-work for this event, I was thinking, how am I going to feel about this? Am I still mad? Yes, I'm, but it just is not healthy or helpful for me to harbor any of this. I would like to think that it's okay and that I made my point by, doing what I did. And then when I stopped doing what I did to follow up, then I should somehow let it go, just let it go. But I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how I would be when I got there. And of course, being in sales, you can, you can just, hey, it's great to see everyone, which is exactly what I did. But you know what? I saw her and it was legitimately really nice to see her. And all the parts of her that I always had a great affinity for, I still did. And she had a big grin on her face, and it was a really nice, I had a really good interaction with her. Now, on her part, how she was, I don't know. Yeah. But the point of the story is I recognized I had actually let all of it go, and it wasn't bothering me at all.
I thought the story was going to end up with like, I confronted her and yelled at her and it felt so good.
I threw a chair.
Well, what you did was like you chose peace. I mean, kind of for yourself.
I did. Yeah. I let it go.
Throwing a ruckus about it.
Yeah. I just decided somewhere in my system, I just decided to truly let it go. And, you know, this is the work. This is the self-awareness work. This is the stuff you and I talk about all the time in real life. It's like, it's not easy. You know, that obviously wasn't that egregious of an experience. Like, you know, it wasn't a life or death situation. But that same insidious feeling in the past could have really eaten away at me. And then I could have talked about it and looked for other people to feel bad about it with me. You know, there are a number of things that we do to try and get over our feelings rather than just actually releasing them. You know, there's a number of things that we do.
Yeah. You know, you always talk about like collecting stamps.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And this is what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
the
only way to get rid of the stamps is to let them go.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Or wait till your whole book is full and then cash it in somewhere, which is not what we want. We're no longer in the stage of green stamps or S&H stamps.
But when you were saying, you were talking about like kind of your body, just kind of keeping score on that.
Yeah.
Oh, there's actually a really good book called The Body Keeps Score.
Oh,
do you ever read that?
Oh, I guess I kind of forgot about that book. I've heard of it.
It's kind of like what we talk about all the time. It's like some of these things that we carry around with us actually physically stay with us. Like it comes off as like nervous feeling, tension in the body, tight muscles, like all sorts of physical kind of expressions that we just try to that we just carry around with us, and we mask them, and you know, but they're there, and unless you can figure out a way to let them go and release that scorecard, it really sticks with you. So let me just ask you, like, when you were kind of thinking about, like, I've got to go to this event and I know this person's going to be there.
Yeah.
Like, did you made a conscious decision, like, I'm going to show up in a different way than you maybe thought you would initially?
You know, I did something really different that I didn't recall doing before. And that was, I didn't push what I was going to do. I asked myself, I wonder how I will feel about this. That was really different. And I mean, I'm consciously aware that in order for me to let this go, that I had to be in the question with myself for a little while, instead of what I normally do because of my high sense of urgency and my need to always like try to get everything done right. I usually just go, okay, well, this is just gonna be what it is, you know, rather than just being curious. Like, what needs to happen for me to just not care about this? Because really, that's what it is. It's like not having the level of care about it that I deemed so important when it was in the middle of it. What would that be like, and what would that do for me? You know, like, this is really curious. And so then right before the event, the one thing I did do was say to the HR person, is there anything I need to be aware of going in? You know, any relationships, any who's really riled, what are we walking into here? And then I did say to her, I'm curious how this person will be towards me. And the HR person said, she acknowledged that she should have reached out to you. I said, oh, she did. It's the first time we had talked about it.
So maybe that was like that was helpful to help you.
Yeah, that was helpful. But, you know, we don't always get that carrot. We don't always get that carrot.
No, for sure.
So that was a bit of a gift. But That's what I would say is like, I just went in there thinking, wow, and it would be so nice if I could just not care.
Yeah. And I for you being a really empathic person,
Yes.
I just imagine like if you went in there guns a-blazing, made her feel like crap, then you would also feel like crap after.
Yes. And the other thing is,
because that's just like a reflection, right? You're gonna pick up that energy. So you chose, hey, let me put good energy into this, and what you got back was good energy.
And you know what? I'll tell you something. There's so many people in my circles, even that I know, that spend a lot of time making up conversations in their heads, being in a state of, I'm going to say this and I'm going to say that, and I'm going to, make them pay. I'm going to make them pay.
Yeah, it's like being vindictive.
Yeah, but
like
a lot of
punishment.
Times, yes, like a punishment. But a lot of times we're not trying to be vindictive. We are simply lashing out because we've been hurt by something. And I think that's a really key way to tell if you are, is when you're having those stories.
Yeah, and then being brave enough to be vulnerable to say like, hey, when you didn't call me and you ghosted me on our relationship, it really hurt me.
Right. Yes, if you can't let it go on your own and you need some sort of interaction, you're right. Like that's the best one. It's just authenticity and talking about it from your own perspective.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to figure out what you need so you can let something go.
Yeah, there's other things that I think about, like as far as just practically trying to let things go, because it is really hard. Like even like very small examples, like do you ever get like cut off in traffic?
Oh yeah,
and
totally.
It pisses you off.
Yeah,
and then you're
especially
like
when I drive like a grandma.
Mad the whole ride home, and maybe like the next day.
Oh,
like it's hard to like let even small things like that go. But with my kids, whenever that happens, I always try to reframe it like, oh no, you guys, that person has to go to the bathroom really, really bad.
I always say,
I'm a little more vulgar than that, but
I always say,
what I mean? You can reframe
they must have ice
things.
cream in the car.
Oh yeah, there you go. Right?
My father-in-law used to say that all the time when
That's
someone
a great
flies
reframe.
by.
There's so many things that if you just reframe it, it's helpful. And like what you did is applying compassion for somebody.
Yeah.
Like you don't know what's going on in her life. Like she ghosted you, but like there was probably something way bigger happening that she just couldn't share with you or something. I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt in that way.
Exactly. I think too that when you get in a habit of not letting things go, they collect, and it's an insidious feeling. And I think that it takes real when you get used to thinking a certain way, and it doesn't matter what way you were thinking, just any way of thinking, it becomes very habitual, and then it becomes a belief. And so if we are constantly thinking that people are out to get us, or they're doing this on purpose, or nobody understands, you don't understand. Like when people hit that piece and they keep cycling on that, it's usually because they've just habitually not been able to let something go early enough in the process. And so it's just collecting and getting heavier and heavier.
Yeah.
I have one other example that can I share?
Right.
Can I share this with you?
Yeah. These are helpful.
So, a number of years ago, and I don't know if I've talked about it on the pod, I think I have, but I worked with a business partner that was mentally ill. And I actually was a distributor of his products. Okay, so I had a long distribution contract. And he was mentally ill, and his illness got worse and worse and worse to the point where it started really affecting my contracts and my clients, like really affecting. He was blowing up databases and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, so I eventually had to leave the partnership. He had a practice of suing everyone that left him. And I was no different. And we were sitting in our kitchen, and the doorbell rang, and my husband answered the door, and it was the sheriff. And he was handing over a stack of papers. And so I was being served.
Yeah.
So just yesterday, Mitch and I were sitting at the same spot, and we were talking, and I was talking about how, unfortunately, some friends of ours, their child was divorcing, and his papers were served. And he said, I don't know what that means. And I said, it's what happens when one person starts legal action on someone else. And he said, oh, Like when you got served papers.
When you got served.
And I sat there for a minute, and do you know what I did? I burst out laughing because I hadn't even remembered. And I am so over that lawsuit. I'm not mad at that man at all. I'm not mad about any of it.
Yeah.
I have so let it go. And I was literally giddy with laughing because I realized how much I had let it go that I didn't even remember.
That's great. So
and I said that.
Having bad long-term memory is a key letting go.
Maybe that's the takeaway, everyone. Bonk yourself over the head with a frying pan. But I said, oh my gosh, I let it go so much I don't even remember. And Mitch said, oh, I didn't, and I'd still be pissed off. That's what he said. And I was like, yeah, well, yeah, but that's the difference here because I don't want to feel like that at all. And it's just kind of an amazing sense of buoyancy.
Yeah.
When something that could take you down doesn't, because you choose to just go, meh, it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, that story or previous story, it's like, it's easy to take things personally.
Yes.
My experience on the things that I initially can't let go of, I feel like they're like personal attacks. They're very personal. But then if you like kind of step away, you're like, yeah, it probably wasn't all that personal.
Yeah.
They're not like, the things I can't let go of aren't maybe specifically targeted at me as much as they are just like circumstance.
Right.
And I like to make them about myself.
Yeah, but I think we do that if we're feeling vulnerable in a certain situation about something, or maybe we are judging ourselves, like we just don't feel good about something that we said or did, or we're just, then I feel like we become almost like we're missing our turtle shell, and then everything that comes at us feels like somebody's trying to do something on purpose, like you're saying. And I think it's just really interesting to think that through.
So let's think about those things. Like, we talked about reframing.
Yep.
We talked about not taking things personally.
Yep.
We talked about practicing compassion.
Yeah.
Maybe apologizing. A lot of the things I can't let go are things that I actually need to apologize for that I did.
That's good.
That I'm kind of like villainizing someone else for something I did.
Oh yeah. You know what? I do ask a really specific question many, many times. It's a question on repeat, and it isn't right in this space. And that question that I would ask is, what needs to happen for me so that I can let this go? What needs to happen for me so that I can let this go? And I think that that's a very self-inflicted focus, which helps us sometimes get out of our own heads and move to action. So it might be something like, I'm going to fantasize about slashing that person's tires for a week, and then I'll feel better. But I think just sometimes, is it a habit too? Like, I think that's really worth thinking about. Is the habit of you feeling that you can't let something go attached to the habit of you refusing to feel good inside? Yeah,
the problem, your brain is so hard to deal with sometimes.
I know it is.
Like like the neurons that wire together. You remember that phrase? But yeah, those paths just get, you kind of obsessively think about something, and then that path gets like deeper and more grooved in. And eventually it's just a part of the way you're thinking. It's really hard to ungroove that.
Do you remember the Vistage speaker, the Native American Vistage speaker that talked about that?
I don't think I ever.
Oh, he was absolutely amazing. And I've thought about the analogy that he gave right in this space. He gave it over and over again. And I remember thinking to myself, what a powerful analogy this man is using, particularly because of his heritage. But he was talking about, we walk this earth and we walk in a path, and we continue to walk in the path. And at first, all we do is flatten out the grass. And pretty soon, there's a little divot in the dirt as we're walking. And pretty soon, there's a deep path. And pretty soon, there are walls on either side of us. And I loved that visual. It was such a powerful visual. And you know what? I don't even remember what his message was. I just remember him talking about that. And I remember thinking that's so true. And I think it sits right in here. Is that the path of being able to let go. I mean, it is, I'll tell you something, there's nothing that feels better in my system than not having things that are bothering me or people or experiences. And, I've used a couple of examples today. One was not that big of a deal, really. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. But one was a really big deal. I mean, that cost me $75,000 of my own money to prove that I didn't do anything wrong. It was such a scary thing to be served and to get sued, and to be able to sit here and just say, I feel really good about the whole process. I mean, that is nuts, right? It's nuts. But it feels it's just a great feeling.
So one last question. How do we figure out what those things are that we might be holding on to that we're not super conscious of every day?
What do you think?
I don't know. That's why I was asking you. Well, I think just being a little bit mindful of it, like after this conversation, I might sit around for a little while and think about it. Because it's not a thing that I think about all the time. It's not like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, got my coffee, and now I get my notebook out and make a list of the things I'm not letting go of,
But I don't know, maybe that's a good idea.
Maybe that's
not a bad idea. I think it takes intention. It just takes intentionality. And you know what? It's the beginning of the year. And maybe that's what you choose rather than a big list of your resolutions. By the way, proud of you. We're not doing a resolutions on the first of the week
I'm not committing to anything this year.
But I don't know. Maybe that's a really, really good thing for your own mental well-being.
Yeah, what things am I going to let go of this year?
Yeah, what things are bothering me? And I think you asked the question, and then I was really interested in what you thought. But to answer the question from my perspective, you said, how do you know or what kinds of things to let go of? I feel like, if there's something that keeps coming up for you, like it's one of the first things that you think of when you wake up, or when you get upset, you also go to that and another thing. And then you go there. If you find yourself fantasizing about the situation and solving it in these grandiose ways in your mind over and over again, then it's probably something worth letting go of. Like, I think that there's telltale signs, and I think everybody knows their own habits. And when they don't feel good, here's another really, really, really big one. If you find that you're being unusually reactionary to other people, if you are overextending your emotion and having really strong responses to things that are out of context for the situation, it's usually because you have something that needs to be let go.
Yeah. It's that we should talk about this at like a whole episode about this, but I always think about it as like a glass of water.
Yes.
Right. You've got a glass of water.
Yeah.
And most of the time, like, our emotion, it's not empty.
No.
It's like hovering around a quarter, half, and things happen during the day and a little more water is in there and then down. But if we're carrying all of this stuff around all the time and not letting it go, it's like the glass is all the way full to the top.
Exactly.
And like the littlest bit more
over.
Water goes in and it spills.
Exactly. That's
and that
such
could
a
happen
great
over
visual.
and over all day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, good.
It's a good exercise. It's such a good exercise. I hope people can.
I look forward to your list next week of things you're going to let go.
I don't really have much stuff anymore.
You'd let it all go.
Let it all go.
You're like,
and no,
like what? In the Frozen movie,
no,
you're like
don't
Elsa
sing it.
or whatever.
Yeah, Elsa. Exactly.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.